Hi, this is Raphael,
I'm Guillaume.
and this is launch. Okay, again. Launch. This is launch. We're launching Launch with us. Okay, yeah. Let's do it. Hi, this is Raphael,
I'm Guillaume.
and this is Lunch with the Devs, a podcast where we talk about the development of Tablecraft. We're experimenting with this new kind of Devlog format that will hopefully be easier for us to produce and easier for you to consume. So let's jump right into it. It's actually been a while since we.
It's been several months.
Yeah, it's been several months since we wrote the last devlog. Since you wrote the last devlog, actually.
Yeah, about Games for Change.
Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about that?
About Games for Change?
Yeah.
I want to talk about what happened since Games for Change, which is basically. So we were finishing our master's degree, and as a result, we got extremely busy, and we were also spending a lot of time on an acquisition offer that we got at Games for Change. And until very recently, we didn't have basically any time to focus on actually developing and improving the game. And that changed out of nowhere when we sort of had the good fortune to fail to be acquired.
We should also explain a little bit why we got that offer, right? Or those offers. We should talk about the SBIR basically.
All right. So when we were at the Games for Change conference, which is a yearly conference hosted in New York City, we were there to showcase Tablecraft and specifically to meet with a sort of group of people who we've learned about who are all participating in this economy, basically around a grant called the SBIR that the government gives for all kinds of reasons, but in our particular case from the Institute of Education Sciences for its Small Business Innovation and Research grant. And it would relate to basically anything that can be defined as technology that would improve or change or test ways that kids can learn that the government could use. And so Tablecraft fits that bill because it's actually quite similar in terms of the list of buzzwords to other projects that the SBIR has funded.
Right.
That several sort of significant players in the education games landscape have been using as their
like shell games and filament games.
Exactly.
Right. Happy Atoms is a big one. Both Happy Atoms and HoloLab champions from Shell Games have received this grant. But why do we need this grant though? Why don't we go for some other source of funding?
Well, it seems like all the successful players live and die by this grant, basically. Right. And the specific like virtual reality, sophisticated, friendly, well-made education games seem to be made by a small number of companies, and those companies are the exact success stories, shell games, filament games, that the grant providers themselves use to show why this is a good use of government funds. Right. VR is an emerging market. It's not a guaranteed investment.
Exactly, and because it's an emerging market, the market is still small enough that it's very hard to make money off of like a VR product, and as such,
or at least guaranteed money.
Right, and as such, it is even harder to get investment. Right, and unfortunately, we're not rich, so we can't self-fund development of the game.
A lot of the VR games you see right now are funded by Oculus, essentially.
Although I think I read that they stopped funding at a loss. I think up until this point they were giving money away for free, basically, for you to develop like a VR game and just to kickstart the ecosystem. But I think now they expect you to make a return on their investment. So it's not that easy anymore to get funded by Oculus.
And even that sort of ignores, I think, the special property of the SBIR, which is that because of this presumed social good of the types of projects being funded here.
Right.
Tablecraft is a game that doesn't just make for a good immersive experience. It also ideally exposes kids to subjects that they will be able to get a lot of value out of in the future, and gives them a more positive relationship and so on. And those are things the government is willing to spend money on without taking any of the IP. So if we...
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, if we can fund this with the SBIR rather than with investment, that means we can own more of the company on the
and therefore the creative direction. Because that's one of the things that's really important to us, and in fact it's partly why it's so hard to strike a deal with any other companies that might be potentially interested in acquiring us. We want to retain a lot of the creative freedom and a lot of the direction for the games design, because when you get into the educational space, at least from what I have observed, it's you start getting pushed in a very, like, you start getting pushed more and more towards an like
there's a lot of pressure to include as many facts as you can.
Yeah, exactly. You summarized it pretty well. Whereas we are trying to keep it balanced. We definitely want it to be like educational, but also fun. It needs to be fun. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
When you're designing a game, normally one of the goals is to cut all the fat, to cut anything that the player would have to do or learn that's not directly central to what's fun about the game.
Right.
And that's in tension with our secondary goal of making sure that all the skills that you learn in a game, which games are really great places to learn skills, but a lot of the time they're very arbitrary. Mm-hmm. All the skills you learn in our game might be relevant to your future, but we also don't want to include too many future relevant skills for fear that it's an education game like the education games we've seen. So in order to strike that balance, we're sort of going straight to the source as far as we can tell for the high quality parts of this community, which seems to center around this grant. And that was why we were at Games for Change, which was a place where those people, the people who were making these games, were, and it was also a place which had representatives from the Institute of Education Sciences, and so we were able to talk to all those people about how this process works, and have them evaluate Tablecraft, and they were pretty impressed, as you might be able to see if you read the devlog. But then after that, we went dark.
Yeah, we should mention as well that this is no small potatoes. Like, this grant will fund the development of the game for another 8 months, I think. At a minimum. At a minimum.
If we get just the phase 1, and then if we get to phase 2, that's not just this game, but probably future games being
right. Because phase 1 is $200,000, and phase 2 would be $900,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. We can do a lot of stuff with that. Tablecraft can go to a lot of...
It's not making an entire game from scratch money.
Right. Definitely not a AAA game.
Yeah. But it is certainly making the difference between a sort of risky and unprofitable VR venture and like a baseline, stable, reasonable investment, which then allows us to get further investment and so on.
Right. It's very good for our mental health. All right. So here we are now. We actually just filed the paperwork for our company, right? For your company. Well,
for my company, yes.
I guess we should also explain that, maybe.
Right. So our
the problem with the SBIR. let's first expose the problem with SBIR. So me, Rafael, I'm a full ride scholar in the United States, and that means I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a foreigner here temporarily on a J1 visa, and there's a lot of benefits to that. But there are also a lot of downsides. And one of the downsides is that I cannot work in the United States. Now, if you've been following Tablecraft for a while, you would know that Tablecraft was born out of a rapid prototyping session that I led a couple of, last year, actually, I think. Exactly 1 year ago, actually. Mm-hmm. And Guillaume joined shortly after. But now he's kicking me out. He's kicking me out because, unfortunately, to attain this grant, the company needs to be not entirely, but majority U.S. owned, and not just that, but there's also some complications with my J1 visa. It's best if I'm not connected to it on paper, at least. Obviously, I'm still, I'm still.
Let's say heavily involved.
Let's say heavily involved. Yeah. So yeah, anything you want to add to that?
Just that I also have EU citizenship because France doesn't care.
Right. Yeah, lucky. So you have dual citizenship, right? French and American. Cool. So yeah, so Guillaume filed the paperwork for our LLC,
which is called Not Suspicious because I own it by myself in my partnership with Rafa.
And I am in no way involved. Totally not suspicious.
Except in an advisory role.
So we did that this past week, but we've also done a bunch of other stuff. Do you want to talk about some of the stuff you started working on?
So we finally, I'd say 2 weeks ago, started to get to really work on Tablecraft full time. It's been a real pleasure. It's been as much fun as I've had developing anything. And the first thing I did, which I think. What happened was it was the buttons, and what happened was that you encouraged me to find something small and fun to build.
Right. So that we could build some momentum.
Yeah, exactly. So that we could start having fun making things, and then we could make something less small. And I have ever since we went to Games for Change, and every single person who got in the VR headset had trouble just like clicking on the buttons in order to activate the machines in our game.
Right.
That has been just making me so mad, and so I set out to try to make competent VR buttons, and so the first thing we did was actually we played a couple VR games, which included the Oculus First Contact.
Yeah, which is amazing.
We tried
the shell games. I Expect You to Die.
Yeah, and we played, of course, Job Simulator.
Yeah, Job Simulator,
which has gigantic buttons.
Yeah, which are great.
And then we tried to sort of synthesize everything we saw there and have some of our own ideas.
Right.
And we ended up going with something that I think is most close to the Oculus First Contact demo, actually, which was literally, as far as I can tell, a game that they published that had the sole function of...
They developed internally. It was a demo that... I believe that it was a demo that they developed internally by their studio to showcase the potential of virtual reality.
To me, not just showcase the potential, it was very clear that it was intended to be used the exact way I used it, which is as a model for developers.
Right.
Of how
that's a
basic
good point.
VR interactions can work.
Right.
And I think it was extremely effective. It was by far the best buttons that we used. And one of the big things that they did super well was they were physically modeled, and they had haptics along the entire sort of travel time. So what I mean by that is, instead of having buttons that just sort of activate and play an animation when you get your hand nearby or whatever, they respond to your hand with physics. So you have to physically push the button down its track, like a real world button.
Exactly, like a real world button.
And you play like a little buzz based on the distance that the hand is traveling, so that way you have this sort of physical sense that you're not pressing something that has a binary state. Basically, you're actually having to push this button until it hits it.
This mechanical button. Right.
And so that was like a fun little challenge, and I'm hoping to put together, if we have time, a text devlog about how I ended up implementing that.
One of the old school.
Yeah. The previous generation Tablecraft devlogs. But yeah, it's just sort of like a technical heavy devlog, because I'm proud of the solution I came up with to try to sort of get what felt best about the various VR buttons we tried.
Right. So now we also have haptic feedback. With the buttons, we also implemented haptic feedback in the game, right?
Yeah, the blobs, I think, at least
if
a few commits ago, you could pet the blobs and they would buzz, but I'm not sure that's the case right now.
we'll have to double check. We've kind of, well, I don't want to say crunch, but we've put a lot of hours yesterday trying to meet a deadline for a competition that we were going to be applying to today, but turns out the deadline was moved, so now we have some more time to focus on that. So the buttons was kind of the first thing you started working on, and for me, for some reason, I decided it was a good idea. It was a great idea to add isotopes in the game.
As his first task.
Yeah, as my first task. And mind you, there are nearly 1,000 like isotopes. If you if you multiply, there are 118 elements, and if you say that, let's say, each element, I mean, not all of them have like 8 isotopes or whatever, but we could extrapolate these at least to the 800s. So there are like roughly 800 isotopes, and I had to manually copy all of this data into a JSON file, which is what we use to load the information regarding pertaining to the elements and their isotopes and so on into the game, and even the craftables and stuff. We use a JSON file for that, and so I had to painstakingly put all of that information into a JSON file. I think it's probably the most comprehensive JSON file in the world.
I doubt that very much. That's a very strong statement.
I was going to say the most comprehensive element-related JSON file.
Yeah, somehow still I would be impressed.
Probably, I don't know. Unless Wikipedia uses JSON files, then I don't know.
So I would guess Wikipedia is not the gold standard for comprehensiveness when it comes to details about elements.
So I did that, and
but the big goal was this sort of gameplay goal that we had, which is so there's this concept called a radioactive decay chain.
Right.
In chemistry or physics or whatever field, I don't really actually know how these things break down.
Yeah, it's both.
Where you basically when an isotope is radioactive, it's because it's unstable and it's going to have some kind of effect that will release energy because it has excess energy in its current configuration. Mm-hmm. And when it does, it typically changes into a different isotope. And there's no reason to assume that isotope will be stable necessarily, especially for really, really big isotopes or big just element numbers. And so you'll commonly get these sort of long chains of this thing after, a tenth of a second has a 50% chance to decay into this thing, which after some time frame, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, in the game, we should mention that in the game we're not using the actual half-life, the actual duration or whatever.
I guess I mean in real life decay.
Right.
And so we thought in a game about unlocking the periodic table, it would be really fun to unlock sort of explosively a whole sequence of elements by finding something really radioactive that then becomes something else that becomes something else and so on. Yeah,
and we've actually implemented that. Guillaume has went ahead and did the the gameplay implementation. I did the back end, did the actual implementation in the game, and we've been playing with it, and it's just like I was playing with it for like 1 hour and a half today, and it felt awesome.
Up until now, the sort of progression system in Tablecraft has been missing some key features, let's say, such that it was very, you would just sort of know that like there were parts of the periodic table you could never unlock.
Right.
And you'd be kind of stuck in the little corners that you had made for yourself. Yeah. And now, because things can decay in what seems to my human eyes to be a very unpredictable way, because there's some 800 or whatever potential isotopes, you can just you can find yourself not just unlocking things in a fast series, which is fun, but also unlocking stuff that up until now has literally been impossible to unlock in Tablecraft, because we have to figure out how you're going to craft something out of Mendeleevium or whatever.
Our approach to designing Tablecraft, at least thus far, has been to cram as many features as possible into the game, at least the first pass on every feature, and then see how they evolve, as opposed to trying to extensively work on a feature for a very long time. We just cram as much as we can, put it in front of other people, and what the things that they like, and depending on the reactions that we see from them, we'll explore more of that feature and so on and so forth. Which, in my opinion, is a very effective game design strategy.
I think the current actual behavior of radioactive elements was something we basically just discovered from trying to implement it. Where they basically almost fly around.
Yeah, they have a stroke.
Bounce around on the floor.
Several strokes, actually. The freak out.
I think a stroke is you just sort of fall down.
Okay,
A stroke is a very sad and like static kind of.
Right. So what is a seizure?
Yeah, there we go. That's the one.
Yeah. Seizure.
While we're sort of randomly putting out medical conditions.
Yeah, that's not good. All right, so let's move on from that. Yeah, buttons and isotopes. What else? There was also the assistant movement. I almost said Siri. So we call the robot assistant. We call her Siri internally. Mm-hmm. But if any Apple lawyers are listening to this podcast, just to, be aware that we're going to change the name soon.
Yeah, it's the assistant.
Yeah,
in the code, in most of the code. I haven't remember to change it for everything.
So you were telling me about a tool that you use for that you really liked, or
So we were using the way the robot moves right now is a spline.
Right.
A spline is this sort of mathematical concept for describing like a smooth curve between a sequence of points.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine if you're trying to move a robot from looking at one machine to looking at another machine, you'd want to have a smooth way to do that, and you'd want to be able to describe that sequence of points, and you'd want to all just sort of happen and take care of itself. And so generating a spline with a pre-existing algorithm is a really neat way to go about that. And I was very pleased to find a completely free sort of open source solution, I think called Bezier solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
On the Unity asset store and subsequently on just GitHub. That has it's basically just sort of one Russian guy's experimentation with trying to implement various Bezier algorithms that he found online. And it's super well commented and documented and super transparent, and it's really cleanly written, and it just has that feeling of like a good open source code base. So I've been really enjoying working with that, and that's something maybe not next week, but in the upcoming weeks for sure. I'm hoping to add a lot of polish to the robots movement because the tool is so easy to use. It shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I guess the last thing to talk about would be Fabiana. Fabiana joined us full time. She's not here with us today, but so Fabiana was one of the artists I initially developed Tablecraft with last year. But then she got busy with other projects. As you know, we didn't work on Tablecraft until just now, basically. And when we were discussing these potential acquisitions or partnerships with the companies we were talking to, Fabiana wasn't really involved because she hadn't been involved with the project for a long time. However, we really wanted to work with her, and we tried pushing for that in the deals we were discussing. And that was one of our main concerns, having access to an artist, because for instance, I'm not a 3D artist, Guillaume's not a 3D artist,
nor are we animators.
Right, nor are we animators, and so as such, as you know, Tablecraft very much depends on having these fun toys that you can play with, and so having access to an artist is very important to us. Luckily, or I don't know, unluckily, the deals didn't go through, and now we're back to working with Fabiana. Fabiana was very much willing to work with us. She's awesome. She's joined our Discord as well. By the way, join our Discord if you haven't yet. We have a tiny but quickly growing community there, and that's where you can get hear first for all the new stuff we're working on and so on and so forth. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that now we have a 3D artist, so expect to see a lot more stuff. In fact, we as you might have noticed, we've already started sort of changing the environment. This is not Fabiana's art. Fabiana has yet to come here and make this look good. This was just me playing around a little bit. When Fabiana comes here and starts tweaking the lab to look more like a polished AAA kind of experience, then it's really going to start to come together, I think. And I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to that.
So one thing that we've already seen is the very sort of first prototypes was this kind of sterile white environment,
Right.
And the first testing we've done is Fabian has been experimenting with just blocking out different shapes for the lab, and Rafael has been experimenting with sort of different colors and materials and stuff. And having like a more playful lab makes a striking difference, specifically in VR. And I feel like I don't feel it as much when I'm looking at the screen, but when I'm actually in the lab, it makes a big difference in how I feel about what I'm doing.
Yeah, it definitely makes it feel more charming. It's more inviting as well. We added the Treehouse environment like two days ago or whatever, and I tried it yesterday, and then today I felt the urge to get back in the game and revisit my Treehouse essentially. So that's what we've been up to. Now let's talk about some of the things we want to do next week. Or did I forget something? Or I don't think so, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, the isotopes took a ton of our time.
Yeah, the isotopes, big deal.
It's 800 of them.
Yeah,
there's one comma missing in the JSON. That took a while to figure out.
Well, I mean, actually, one comma is not bad.
That's true. Yeah. Good job.
So let's talk about some of the stuff we wanna work on for next week. Do you wanna start?
Yeah. So the isotopes exist in the game. We've developed a whole backend to describe our elements as having a little more individuality and so on. But there's not actually a lot of ways to interact with that and understand what that means as a player yet. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to start changing the periodic table to be more of a sort of interactive user interface that can actually tell you about the blocks that you're holding and what they mean in terms of real world elements and also sort of gameplay consequences.
Right. Not just that, but being able to interact with the periodic table and being able to, let's say, lock an element and then look around the lab.
Yeah.
That's going to be
long-awaited feature.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Because right now the way that it works is if you point at an element on the periodic table, it kind of highlights all of the cubes in the lab that are the same of that element you're pointing to. However, like when you want to look behind you or whatever, you got to do like some yoga pose, as a friend of ours, Bill Saberham, told us at Games for Change. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it so that you can just lock an element on the periodic table and then look around and see where it is on the lab, on the Treehouse in this case. So that's one of the things I'm excited about. What else are we gonna be working on next week? I guess. Right now we're looking for a researcher. That's one of the things that's taking a little bit of our time.
But part of the SBIR is that we have to be contributing not just sort of education technology, but we have to be actively participating in research to study its effectiveness. And so it's not enough for us to just make Tablecraft if we want the government to help pay for it. We also need to not necessarily prove that it works, but contribute to the sum of human knowledge about whether it works. And what VR can do that's different from other media, for instance.
So we have to do a pilot study, a small pilot study until the end of this year.
Yeah, and we have to design the study, and then we need to find people who can help us find kids to test it, and we need to get advice on whether our study is broken somehow.
Exactly. So there's that. So we're taking care of that bureaucracy stuff. But feature-wise, what were the other things we were going to be working on? So there's the isotope. So right now, one of the things that doesn't feel good yet is when you immediately unlock an unstable radioactive element isotope, it immediately starts having a seizure.
Yeah, they just fly around the world.
Yeah, and you can never tell like what it was that you actually unlocked. So another thing we're probably going to be doing is when you put a radioactive element on the converter machine, which is a machine that converts elements into objects and objects into elements, or the scanner machine, which is the one that scans elements. the seizure will stop for a second. We'll stop for a while until
it'll probably show on the big screen, if you will,
Right,
periodic table,
Right.
information about that element, so that you can have a better idea what's going on, what it's going to decay into, that kind of thing.
Exactly. On top of that,
if I finish that, then I'm going to start hopefully building better hands, right? Because I enjoyed making better buttons.
Right.
And we noticed a lot about how our hands were deficient when we were trying other VR games. So that's something that I'm excited for.
Right. One of the things we saw with I Expected to Die, I think, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Was the telekinesis ability.
It's a really brilliant interaction scheme.
As they call it.
I think it's going to be like a dominant way that VR games are played for a while at least.
Yeah, and so we're thinking of trying something like that as well, which will, in turn, will allow the player to move stuff around the lab and carefully place them wherever they want it to be. So who knows what kind of design possibilities that's going to open. Like perhaps customizing the lab and so on and so forth. Those are ideas we've already started bouncing around.
And our style is very much going to be to just start making like slapdash versions of that work right now, and then we will see.
Yeah, exactly.
Then having tested it, we will start to design it in more concrete way.
Exactly. And so I believe that's it. I mean, other than that, we're going to continue to work on improve. I'm going to continue at least to probably with Fabiana, improving the the visual quality of the lab, I guess, and of the environment around us. I mean, those cabinets are from the first prototyping session.
They're from the past.
They are from the past.
And
that's
the professors
true.
from the future.
Those cabinets, that bookshelf, the books themselves, man, that's they need to go away. We need new stuff. So we're gonna be working on that. Probably also working on figuring out how to fix the flying light fixtures that we have on the glass ceiling right now. We'll probably just have them hanging from the tree branches or whatever. Those kind of small little details that we're going to be working on. And I believe that is all, right? Or anything else you want to say?
You're going to be looking into light mapping so that we can get better performance.
Yes, I will. Hopefully. Actually, the performance is not bad.
Yeah. No, it's the physics.
I straight up had 7 blobs today.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how many cubes on the lab. Let's just say 200. And this is a conservative estimate.
That is a very conservative estimate.
And the performance was great. There was no hitches whatsoever.
All these were separately interacting at 90 frames per second physics objects. Yeah. So I'm honestly shocked.
I mean, you didn't have to be that detailed. but yeah. So we're also constantly working on performance. And so this was our first lunch with the devs. Even though we're not having lunch, we had lunch before this. We didn't want to record this during lunch because otherwise, it would just sound.
It'd be like an ASMR video.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, exactly. But louder. To be an ASMR video, but loud. Yeah. And thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Thanks a lot.